My name's Sasha Pete, and I'm joined by a fantastic individual, someone who represented the green and gold, and boy, did he have an engine. None other than the great Kenny Murphy. Welcome, Kenny, to this conversation.
Thank you very much, Sasha. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So tell us, Kenny, how did you fall in love with our great game?
How? I've got no idea. I don't think I know how. I think I was born in love with it. I've always, football has been me ever since I could remember. Always. I remember as a youngster growing up, it was just football, football, football. Everything was around football. Birthday presents were football, balls, boots. Christmas presents were balls, boots. I think my life revolved around trying to be the best I can at football all the time. Yeah. Nothing got in the way. Everybody that wanted to be around me, be with me, had to accommodate in football. So,
and it's been you've been here for over 40 years, but we haven't got rid of that Scottish accent.
Yeah.
You grew up in Dundee, is that right? You were born in Dundee?
I was born in Dundee, yeah. 1956. Wow.
And so tell us, was it playing in school? How, tell us the setup in Scotland. How does that progress as a young boy playing on the streets and playing for your school side?
It was kind of like, I'm sure everybody's aware, Scotland isn't a really cold climate. Where I grew up was kind of mild. We had mild winters, but we also had mild summers as well. So you could go through the summer. It never changed. Some people liked a bit of Wimbledon. Some people, I don't know. There was a lot. The TV was dominated by the BBC, so you got the English programs, which was a lot of cricket. But where I grew up, it was soccer, it was football all year round, and that was all you did. It was just football. We used to have 10-a-side football games in the school playground at night time. After work, everything was all football, all football. So. Nothing come close to football. It was dominated. People talk about South America and that. When I grew up, it was exactly the same. Everything was football.
And when did you start noticing that you might make a go of it? So when did you realise that your qualities were probably a little bit better than the other boys on the street?
I never did. Definitely not.
Okay.
No. I never had that level of confidence. I always felt as though I was trying to keep up. Always. All my... I look back now and look at some of the things I achieved. Nothing big spectacular. We spoke earlier about Tyrone James. Some people seem to... Tyrone was a superstar when he first broke on the scene. He was a guy kind of who made it in the UK but struggled to make it out here. Whereas a lot of people struggle to make it in the UK but come out here and fit in very well. They do well. So I'm not sure how it works. But for me, I never felt as though... I can't remember ever feeling I was good. Can't remember. But when I look back, my achievements as a youngster was quite good. It was quite... It started at school. It was all about the school football at the time. There was no organised outside school football when I was very young. It came later on. But I was the first kid to actually break into the school team, and I played out of the 11 players that played, I've still got pictures of it. The other 10 were 2 years older than me. I was the only youngster there. So, to jump at that age, how old would I have been? I would have been maybe 8, 9, and the other kids were 10 or 11. And that was a big thing at that age. That was massive. But so when I was playing with the bigger kids, I just thought I was useless. I was stupid. I couldn't do things that they could do. So I never felt a big sense of achievement then. And then when I went to secondary school, that's when it got kind of big. But again, I think at that age, I was small for my age. And so I was trying to keep up with the bigger kids that were a bit stronger than me and everything. And it always felt as though it was a bit of a battle, a bit of a struggle, even although I got picked for all the rep sides when I was a kid, the Dundee schoolboys. And then when they started a Sunday league, which took over from school football, not really took over, it was side by side at the time. Thinking back, I actually got headhunted by the people who were building the team. And I ended up playing with the team that dominated, the Sunday leagues. We went on to beat Celtic boys, the Glasgow Celtic team, in the final of the Scottish Cup and everything, which, looking back, was massive. It was massive. It was it was great. So it was as a youngster I was achieving, but I never ever felt as though I was good. Never good.
And so, when at what level were you first paid, like £1 or £2 to play? How old were you when you got your first sort of paid contract?
When I was so let me think about it. Probably around about at the 15, I think it was. I signed what they call schoolboy forms. So a professional club comes along and signs you up. They still do it nowadays. And they pay you, they're not allowed to pay you a wage, so they pay you some expenses. So, and I remember at the time, I think my dad was getting around about £10 a week. And they paid me £3.50 a week just to be on their books. It was unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. Like, what's this? What's going on here? It was fantastic. It was really good. I continued doing I used to deliver the milk in the mornings. It was pretty popular in Scotland. Everybody got their bread and their milk and their paper delivered to their front door. And it was the kids before school, you would go up and do the delivery. So I used to get, I think I got 10 shillings a week or 50 pence a week or something for doing that.
50 pence a week for the delivery and almost £4 for the football contract.
£3.50 or something like that. Yeah. So that was the first time. That was great. That was good.
And was that for Dundee United? Is that
Dundee United? Yeah. The team I played for, the St Columba's Boys, they were called, and they were called Dundee Boys to start off with, and changed their name to St Columba's. We won the league. We used to have big scores and everything like that. Out of that team, 7 of them signed senior for Dundee United, and 3 of them signed for other professional clubs. 2 of them, I think, went to Dundee, and others, and 2 of them played for Scotland. David Neary and Graham Payne played for Scotland out of that team. So it was a very good side, very good, great side. And again, they were all good players. I felt as though I was just trying to keep up with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, that the early the perceptions, because normally the players who end up playing at an international level, they're sort of that class above, but you felt that forever you were just there to make up the numbers, per se.
Maybe not there to make the numbers. Thinking back again, when you look back, you think, it must be not bad. I can't remember ever being on the bench or getting substituted or anything like that. Yeah. So I always made the team. I made the rep sides and everything like that. But in my own mind, I always felt it was, this is hard work keeping up with these guys. These are all good players. Wow. So maybe it was a lack of confidence or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I definitely wasn't an overconfident youngster. I can remember playing with a couple of guys that were just so cocky and so confident. And I used to kind of look at them and think I was a bit more like that a little bit, even although I thought, you're a dickhead, man. But I still admired their bravado sort of thing, confidence, yeah.
And so when would you say that you played your first senior football game? And do you remember when that was?
When you say senior, I made my debut playing in the reserves felt like a senior. I remember I played for Dundee United reserves one time against Celtic at Tannadice Park. And Kenny Dalglish played. He was coming back from injury and just needed a run in the reserves. The place was jam-packed. And it was all, there was always players. Like, for instance, playing that night, the well-known names were Walter Smith and Archie Knox played for us, Dundee United, because they'd been dropped out of the first team and they were playing in the reserves. Now, as you're aware, Archie Knox and Walter Smith went on to coach Man United with Alec Ferguson and everything like that. Yeah. Big names. And Kenny Dalglish and a few other players were playing for Celtic that night. Tannadice Park was jam-packed. I felt as though I was in the seniors then. I felt as though I'd made it then. That was fantastic, yeah. But I made my debut for Dundee United at, I think I was 18-year-old. I'd have to look it up, I can't remember. I was maybe 18, maybe still 17, but 18 in the first team. So I think I played in a few pre-season friendlies that season, and then got in the first team squad. I was in the first team squad but never even made the bench when Dundee United got to the Scottish Cup final against Celtic. It was. So that was a great experience, travelling through on the bus with the players and everything like that, going to Hampden Park, getting a police escort. You know, they picked you up at the edge of town and give you a police escort through the red lights and everything in Glasgow. That was a fantastic experience. Looking back, you know, again, I never thought I'd made it, but it was just, wow, what an experience. Great. It was good. You know what my biggest thrill was? I always remember at one time I'd signed for Dundee United, and I can't remember why, but I was walking down the street with my mum, and the little kids at the school come running across the fence, and they were all going, he plays for Dundee United, he plays for Dundee United. And my mum was so proud. I was more happy because my mum was proud than... you know,
that's fantastic.
I remember thinking, I haven't really played for them yet, but I was just happy my mum was proud.
You were just part of the big part of the squad was celebrity enough in the streets of Scotland, right?
Oh, it certainly was, yeah. I think being a local guy as well, because at that time Jim McLean was coaching Dundee United, and Dundee United had become this small club. They were doing extremely well at the time. I think they were being called the new firm. You know, Jim McLean was doing well, and Alec Ferguson was doing well at Aberdeen at the time. So it was a big club to be with, and it was kind of like being out here, maybe a kid signing for Collingwood, you know, or walking down the street. You're not playing in the first team yet, but wow, he's been signed for Collingwood. You know, all the aunties and uncles talk about it and everything like that. So, but again, I was hungry to get going. I just wasn't getting in the first team. I needed more.
Yeah.
So I wasn't thinking I was successful yet. I was thinking, come on, get me going.
But that's a time. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you only had one substitute on the bench at that time. Is that right?
I can't remember.
I'm pretty sure in the mid.
It was maximum two. It was. I can't remember whether it was one or two.
One or two. Okay, so it's tough. It's not like now where you've got a squad of, you know, there's just as many people on the bench as there are on the field now. It almost seems like that. So
and they were signing players at that time. Jim McLean was a Glasgow guy from the West Coast, and the Dundee United squad was made up predominantly. It was all West Coast players, so they were bringing them for every place. So to have a local guy get signed was great as well, sort of thing. So.
And so you played for a couple of other Scottish clubs after that. So walk us through how those transitions transpired.
Yeah, no, I only played I was with Dundee United, and at the time Scottish football was struggling, and I can't remember what happened, but I done quite well at school. I got marks to go to uni. So they got me a placement. I asked if I wanted to do it, and my dad, it was my father, he says to me, you should do this. Don't rely on the football's terrible in Scotland. You know, the wages were miserly, the game wasn't going too far. They were talking about the whole, it was still the first division. They were talking about going, says Celtic and Rangers will only be the clubs that will be full-time. The rest are all going to go part-time. So I took up an opportunity to join one of the sponsors' businesses, Timex Corporation. I did a mechanical engineering apprenticeship with them at the time. So I was part-time. So when Dundee United said they weren't going to renew my contract, I was there for 3 years. I just finishing up my trade qualifications as well. And a few clubs come and spoke to me, and I ended up signing for Forfar, because Jerry Kerr, who was a previous manager of Dundee United, had come, and he really chased hard to give you, which was kind of
nice,
quite kind of nice. I thought, wow, yeah. So I ended up signing to them, but by this time, a scout who wanted me to sign for East Fife, and I got speaking to him, and I just got married. So I was only 19-year-old, and we got married. And my wife wanted to do some travel just for a bit of adventure. She says, well, you know, seeing you're not doing it, Mum will do it. And she'd heard about people going to Isle of Man and all these things. So and I just says to this guy, I was thinking of doing some travel. And he contacted me, and he says, I've got some clubs in Canada that are interested in signing up players. If I could fix you up with some, would you be interested in travelling there? And I went, yeah, definitely. So I never heard anything for a few more weeks, but I actually, when I signed for Forfar, I got a clause in my contract that if I left the country, I could be a free agent. I was told them I was thinking of travelling. So they put that in the contract. And the guy, after, I can't remember how long, it was quite a few weeks, quite a lot while it went quiet. He called up one day and he says, listen, I haven't managed to get anything out of Canada, but I've got a club in Australia chasing me to get players. Would you be interested in Australia? Now, I just thought of Queensland. I just thought of blue skies, sunny on the beach. Let me go there. I actually signed a contract for 3 months. It was a 3-month contract. And I wasn't aware at the time. Croatia, they bought out Essendon Lions in the hope of getting in the National League. So this was in 1976 they contacted us. They were hoping to make the new formation of the National League, which they failed to do. They never managed it, sort of thing. But, and right at so that was the only club. I played a pre-season for Forfar, that was all. I got some nice rave reviews. I've still got paper clippings of them as well. I was doing quite well, but I don't know why. I just, not staying there. So David Brogan and Joe Tront were there at the time. They ended up playing out here and doing quite well. Ended up, I'm going to go. And Croatia done really well. You know, they paid everything. They were fantastic. So for me as a youngster, you know, they paid a lot more money for me than what Dundee United ever did. They contacted us, and even things like the I can't remember how they got in touch with you. Send a telegram. Here's a phone number. Phone us reverse charges. Going, wow, this is not. At that time, that was a big thing as well. So I was sitting in my mum's house, phoning reverse charges to Australia. I remember thinking, this club must be millionaire. It must be a fortune. But they ended up paying for me and my wife a return airfare to come out for 3 months. Put us up in a flat. Looked after us really well. So, but just before I was going to come, and I hadn't signed any papers when I come out here, nothing. I could have come out and run away, sort of thing. Heidelberg approached me. A guy called Jim Adam was coaching at the time, and it says, "We're in the National League. Croatia's a good club, but they're not going to be in the National League." Try to convince me, and I just remember thinking, "Nah, I'll just stay there, just do what I'm going to do," sort of thing. So, ended up coming out to Croatia. So, all I'd done was Dundee United, for. It was only probably a 3-month pre-season. Played the pre-season comp for them, and that was it. That's it. That was my Scottish career.
And some 40 plus years later,
so 19
a three month. Let's see how Australia goes. To 4.5 decades.
So what happened? I came out here on a 3-month visa and never played a game. Forfar did a dirty on me and refused. They asked the transfer fee.
Okay.
So we got held up for a while, and I missed their end of the 76 season when I came out. I come out here August 76, and I missed the end of the season. Never played a game. So my first game for them was in the pre-season Ampol Cup. Remember the Ampol Cup?
Yep.
The following season. So I had an extended holiday out here. It was fantastic. Fantastic place. I thought Australia was magnificent, just beautiful. It was like I thought it was Florida, or LA or something like that, which is great. Yeah.
And some of the characters, Essendon Croatia, Melbourne Croatia at the time was very sort of British, Scottish driven players. So very passionate supporters. But name some of the characters that are in that side in those early days.
Listen, the guy who arranged to get me out was John Gardner, and he was a big name at the time. I think, you know, from some of the stuff I hear about John Gardner, I probably missed his best. You know, he was starting to get in his 30s. I think he's 10 years older than me, so he was starting to coach. He was thinking about coaching, so he was always the one that took a bit of training and stuff like that. But he was still a good player. But people spoke about him. You know, he was a fantastic player at George Cross and everything like that. So, and he was the driving force behind the club for a lot of years when I was there. So John got he was a big character. But people like George Train, Hughie Gunn in the first years, and there was Hughie Gunn was a big one. I don't know if you remember him. Billy Wojtek played that first year as well. Nick Kuz, I could remember Branko Kalina, Eddie Krinčević come through as a youngster, 17-year-old youngster, burst onto the scene with them. So the first year or two was a bit up and down, probably a little bit off the mark, not quite there. And then they started recruiting. Then they brought Alan Kerr, George McMillan, Grant Smart. They really started building up, and then the Tommy Cummins started coming, the Cal Gilders, Steve Kokoska. They were signing some big names. I didn't know they were big names, but they were really good players. And it went on to, that was, if I look back, you get different sorts of enjoyments. Obviously you enjoy playing for the national team. It's fantastic. And they were a great bunch of guys, really good bunch of guys. But probably looking back, my best time has been with Melbourne, Croatia. The people there were fantastic. The supporters, the committee men were really good to me and my wife, fantastic. And the camaraderie we had as players was fantastic as well. We still got a little messenger page where we got a group where everybody talks. We have catch-ups and reunions. Definitely good, great bunch of guys. Peter Blasby, the goalkeeper. Jakubanovic played there with us as well. Keith Adams, Grant Smart, Howard Andrews, fantastic, yeah.
So the Peter Blasby, Keith Adams getting up to trouble.
They're well known, aren't they? They're well known.
Yeah,
they're still getting into trouble now.
Yeah, great stuff. So what was it about was it the Croatian hospitality, their passion for the game? Talk to me about why. Was it the on-field stuff, or was it a combination of all those things combined?
Combination. I think you speak to some people, and I don't know. I think they're in your face all the time. They were aggressively ambitious. It was in your face all the time. They were going to be number one regardless. It took them probably a lot longer than what they would have liked to, but they eventually got there and won the National League. But it was never a doubt. They were always going to get to the top again. They were aggressively ambitious. So the difference, and I said this once before to someone, when you went to South Melbourne's just as ambitious. They want to be massive. They want their, and I always thought they had the professionalism to be massive. So, and I still think they will be. I think they'll eventually get in the A-League somehow or other. And I'm pleased for them that they've managed to hang together. But it was kind of in the background, whereas Melbourne Knights, it was right in your face all the time. And if they liked you, probably, and I felt as though they took to me. They were fantastic. They're very generous people, very helpful, very nice people, and I liked that. That aggression brought out you felt as though you had to win. There was no, you went out in the park. Don't come back in the dressing room as a loser. You've got to win, sort of thing. So, which I think is great. That's how it's got to be. That's how Man United, how Liverpool, Man City. It's got to be. You've got to go out there with an expectation of winning. Otherwise, you don't win. Yeah. So,
and. So that was it. That 77 or the 78 year, you guys won all the cups, and you were very, very, very successful. Was it 77 or? No, 78?
It wasn't 77. It would have been a bit later.
Okay.
There was one year I don't think we lost the game. We won every competition. Not only that, you won the final. We won the final 7-0 or something like that against Juventus. Yeah. It was just they were so far ahead. Yeah. And there was a couple of times, a couple of other teams come close. But it was always just one or two teams that really. Preston Macedonia were another one. They were the same, aggressively ambitious. So they were always close. And then I remember Frankston City come close one year. They got the Bannon brothers and brought Eamon Bannon out as a guest player, and they actually had a very good side that year. And we just pipped them at the post. I think they were well ahead for a while, but we pipped them at the post and beat them. And then Green Gully came on the scene as well, with Spiteri as a president. Started bringing big players and getting the names and made an impact as well. But there was one year where I think we won every game, never lost. And we never just won, we won it quite comfortably, sort of thing. It was always a challenge. Playing at Olympic Park was fantastic. But to go from Olympic Park to play Albion or something like that, it was a big downturn. So the atmosphere and the surface, it was a big change all the time.
So you're getting selected. So in this time now, we're talking about now the early 80s. You're getting selected for the various Victorian sides, and obviously you made your national team debut. Walk us through. Did you represent Victoria first, or was it?
Yeah, it was. I think Len McHenry was the Victorian coach, and I think he was coaching Heidelberg, to be honest, and he had a few players from Melbourne, Croatia in the side, but I wasn't one of them. He picked a few of them to represent. Cal Gilder was one of them. John Gardner. I think Steve Short was with us at the time and he got picked. So there was a few of them. Tommy Cumming.
Mm.
And then something happened. I can't remember, but Len McHenry come to coach Croatia. And he was only there half a season or something like that. And that's when he picked me in the Victorian side as well. And I never lost a swat after that. I stayed in there all the time. And it was Len McHenry done. He kind of took to my playing style. I think he was one of the ones that tried to get me to go to Heidelberg, and I think because he was probably his interest sparked other people's interest as well. I think, sort of thing. So after that season, I played for Victoria maybe 3 or 4 times, and then I got selected in for some game. I can't remember who it was against. Rory Guntendorf was the coach of Victoria at the time. And so I did the camp, and then during the camp, the games got cancelled, so it went away. And then they sacked Rudy Guntendorf in there, and I thought, oh, well, there you go again. But in the close season, Preston had got in the National League, and Peter Ollerton was a coach, and I actually signed for Preston. I signed a contract with Preston, yeah. And they couldn't agree a transfer fee with Melbourne Knights. But it signed the contract, and they said, "Leave it to us. Don't worry. We'll work out something." And then as soon as we agree the transfer, we'll go down and register it. So I thought I was going to Preston. When Raleigh Rasick had become the coach at South Melbourne,
yes,
and he approached me. I don't know. It just seemed like a big move. They offered more money and all that. Yeah, and they said, "Just sign it. We'll do the same. Sign for us. If we sign you before Preston, don't worry. We'll go with it." And they just went and done it quickly the same day. Bang! It was a South Melbourne player. Before it actually, I don't think I quite realised what I'd done. Peter Ollerton wasn't happy. I'm telling you now. He's a big guy. He's a big fella.
If you get Raleigh to start talking, he'd not stop. He'll confuse you, right?
Raleigh was different. He was a different type of person. Yeah.
Yes, the psychology. How many times did he tell me? How many hours did you spend listening about that 74 campaign? And
that was Raleigh's downfall a little bit. I think he forgot to train. He used to, every training session, would sit and talk for an hour before we went out in the park, and then you go out there and do 20 minutes running around, and that was it. You go, wow. Raleigh was actually, obviously he'd been there, done that sort of thing. But at South Melbourne, he was very disappointing. I think he had Jack Riley with him.
Yeah.
And I think he wanted to sit in the background and just get Jack Riley to do everything.
That Victorian side was like astronomical. I think you got to play against New York Cosmos came out, and Beckenbauer is in that side. Some packed games at Olympic Park.
Yeah.
What was it like? What was it like being on the same park as Beckenbauer?
It's kind of amazing, isn't it? What's it like? I don't know. It's probably like the feeling that I'd never made it as well. It was never a big thing at the time. I've got a picture of him holding. My son was just a youngster at the time, maybe 1 year old or something like that. And I've got a picture of Beckenbauer holding my son. And now my son's 40-year-old, and he looks at it and he goes, "Wow!" And not so much now. A lot of people, likes of people like you, will remember Beckenbauer, but the youngsters don't so much. But there was a time where Beckenbauer was as big as anybody in the world.
Yeah.
And to say you'd played against him, and it's amazing, isn't it? Some of the players, it's amazing.
Yeah, I remember watching that game. There's a VHS of digitization. He'd be able to hit with the outside of his foot
Oh
and
yeah,
curl it around a play and hit it 35 yards.
yeah. Very,
It's like really, and like with zero
yeah.
effort,
Very elegant player.
elegant. Yeah.
He played it upright. You know, if you watch most players, to get your centre of gravity, you open your legs and you get down so you could take off quickly and that. Whereas Beckenbauer stood up. I remember feeling so small compared to him. You go to pressure him, this guy's standing away up there. And I think that's where he got his vision from. You know, most people get down, the heads down, looking at the ball, and he's standing upright, looking around. Very elegant player, yeah.
You're a left-sided player, so I think the majority of your time in club football you played on the left, and then
Yeah.
when you made the Australian squad, Frank used you more in the middle because you had this massive engine. You could run all day. What was the difference between, let's say, playing out wide on the left versus playing in the inside and having that free role?
A massive difference, massive. Playing, you don't realise. As I said, I was always quick. I had this big loping stride, so I never looked like a big quickie. Tommy Cumming had these little steps, as you mentioned earlier. I had sort of I'm all legs, so I probably don't look as quick, but I was always one of the quicker ones, so I always got stuck out wide. And I'm a right footer, but I've always played on the left.
So, really?
Yeah. And a lot of people used to say to me, my right foot was for standing on, but I'm a right footer. So I developed my left foot not bad, quite decent sort of thing. And my whole game was evolved around having my back to the touchline, so nobody could come up behind me, so I knew what to do. And I preferred going on my right foot, so I used to have this dip and cut inside and stuff like that to get on my right foot. And then when I went in the middle, I was lost. I had people coming up behind me. I couldn't do my dippy and turn on my right foot. It was a big adjustment, and I never ever felt comfortable in the middle, never. But Frank wanted it because I was playing with other players that he very disrespectfully said were more creative and more technically gifted than me. To play with Oscar Crino, a Jackhoff,
Peter Catholis at the top,
Joey Watson. You needed somebody to complement that, somebody that could put themselves around and cover the distance. And to be honest, at the time, I remember thinking, wow, I couldn't put myself around. I was a winger where everybody tried to kick me. I didn't know what you seen in me, but I quickly learned. If that's what it took to get in the team, I quickly learned. And I quite enjoyed getting in the middle. You get much more involved in the game. You could go any place you want. You could be physical. You get a lot more tackles going in. You could defend yourself as opposed to leaving yourself exposed out wide. Quite enjoyed that side of it, definitely. But I never ever felt comfortable in the middle. Never. I much preferred the open spaces.
And the obviously being of Scottish heritage, you had that double header where we went away first, and it didn't really fall for us. And then the return leg in Melbourne, you started that game. What was it like standing up to the national anthem? I think it's 85 we're talking about now, 1985, a cold, wet day. I remember being a little kid in the stands that day, and just after the game crying my eyes out. But what was it like? Standing and listening to the national anthem prior to that game?
Oh, fantastic! Yeah, by that time I had no affection. I didn't. People were saying to me they wanted Scotland to win. Scotland, and at that time I was thinking, wow, nah, we're if we're not Australians, we're definitely Australian football. It's us. This is us. We're representing it. I don't care who it is we're playing. I want Australia to win, and it was kind of really disappointed when some of my mates were saying that they wanted Scotland to win. I was going, you've lived out here for 10 years and you want to get out here. What are you doing? And they were playing the game here, but they still wanted Scotland to win. Get out here. I could understand them having this affection for the Scottish heritage or something like that, but to actually say they wanted Scottish football to beat Australian football when we are Australian football, get out here. No chance. So I was, the game in Melbourne, I was proud of what Australian football put on that night. the picturesque, the playing surface. You know, Frank wanted some scrappy playing surface. Get we here, all the players wanted something that we could have a real go at Scotland about. We didn't want to play on. We didn't want to play up in Darwin on a crappy surface and it's too hot. Melbourne suited us fine. So I thought the game did themselves proud that night. I really did.
Yeah, but the probably the loss, it was we've come far, but still a bridge too far. You know what I mean? And that was our destiny for many years to come. So the angst of 85 and then 89 and we go on, right? So of these failed campaigns, I thought you guys played pretty well that game. Watching back, I watched that game back probably about 6 or 8 months ago now, and you definitely we should have scored that day. I don't know how we didn't put a couple in.
We're very competitive, and I think I remember in my mind thinking, to beat Scotland, because at that time Scotland was still they were definitely, looking back, they were definitely winning away, they were falling away, but they were still regarded as a world power then. Yes. If you look at some of their players here, they had
the names.
Really big names here.
Souness, Dalglish.
To beat them, Davy Cooper, Frank McAviney, their goalkeeper, and they had some big names here. So to think we were going to beat them 3-0, probably, as a player, you don't think about it. You just go out and want to win, and you get, as you say, you get the first goal, and you never know what happens from there. But I remember thinking, I just want to win. Even if it's just 1-0. Let us win. Okay. And all the way through the game, I remember thinking, we're a chance here. Scotland's not playing that great, and we're a chance. We could win this game. So to finish the game 0-0, whilst I felt as though we done well enough to hold our head up, I was disappointed we'd never beat them, even just 1-0. Just let me beat them. So I could go back to everybody and say, "Hey, you were lucky."
Who did you room with in the national team?
Joe Watson.
Joe Watson.
Yeah.
And what was that? What was that like? Were you guys the odd couple? Were you neat and orderly, or how was it like?
No, we were both very similar. We grew up not that far from each other. Joe was from the next county, sort of thing. So we were kind of different people, different personalities, but had the same sort of sense of humour. We got along really well. Joe Watson was a smashing guy, really nice guy. Yeah. We become friends afterwards. We visited each other, stayed at each other's house and stuff like that. Yeah, it was really good. So
let's just rewind. So you talk to me about how you signed for South, and it wasn't in that year, but the year after that you guys. 84, I think, from memory. 1984, South won the title, and you've got a pretty good squad. So Brown, Peter Lumitz in goals, Oscar Crino in that side. Who did you think were the standout players in that 84 squad?
Listen, I think again, that team come together. So South sacked Raleigh Rasick halfway through his first season.
Yes.
And then they brought in Lenny McKendry. And Lenny done really well. He got us organised and got us... The players were good enough. But it wasn't a great mix, I don't think. There were some really good players here. So, for instance, I signed, and one of the things... Lenny McKendry was at Heidelberg at the time, and he tried to sign me at Heidelberg. And when I told him I was going to go to South, I thought, you cheeky bandit. He said to me, it was kind of like, Ken, don't you understand? You're a left-sided player. They've got Steve Wooden there. It's just played for New Zealand in the World Cup. They've got George Campbell. They've got Branko Buljevic. They've got a couple of others here. And I remember thinking, what, you don't think I'm going to get the team? Piss off, you. I thought he was insulting. So anyway, I went there. And halfway through the season, Lenny had something that happened at Heidelberg, I can't remember what, but he ended up going to Green Gully. And then he left the Green Gully job to come and take over South Melbourne. So, and when he come, he was really good. He says, I finally got you. And I went, at least he never says, you never join me, piss off, go away, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was fine. And and what I just mentioned, that 4 or 5 left-sided players, there was probably the same in other positions. It just wasn't well balanced.
Okay.
So, and I think he selected his players quite quickly, Lenny. And he was, if you look at his sides, he very rarely changed the sign. Once you got in, him and Frank Harrick done exactly the same. Once you got in, you had to lose your spot. It wasn't just you get injured, you're out, and you had to fight your way back in. Once you were in, sort of thing. So he settled us down well, and we actually had quite a good second half of the year in '83. We ended up finishing, I think we finished 4th. And I think we were second bottom when they took over or something like that. Yeah,
oh, wow.
We were struggling under Raleigh and Jack Riley. We struggled, but we ended up finishing off quite well, doing quite well. So the base of the players were there, and he brought in a couple of others. And if you look at it, what are the standout players? There were standout players in every position, every single one of them, and they all got better. Oscar Crino was a youngster just out the AIS. Really, they were talking big of him, but he hadn't really done anything. Lenny put him straight in the team. Even although I thought he was a bit off the mark in his first year, maybe, Lenny put him right in the team. So I don't know how that worked, where it went, but they stuck with him, even although I thought he played. I thought Carl Halfer carried Oscar for that season, the second half of '83. But then you could see he came on. You could see the investment paid off. He ended up being a superstar, sort of thing. He was great.
That '84 season, he really, I think, came to blossomed.
Again, he was an elegant player. He was another one that played upright and stood there. He could really elegant. And then you had Alan Davidson, who was starring at that time as well. And then Charlie Egan and Dougie Brown just hit a partnership off.
Up front,
That was one of the big ones. And then he'd signed Bobby Russell and Steve Blair and John Eisendoorn. Position. Every position was strong. They could compete with everybody. And we'd done really well. I remember Sydney City had a similar type squad. Everybody spoke about them. But I remember playing against them. It was a big game. Just I thought the National League at that time, you look at it, it was quite strong. Playing wise and crowd wise and everything like that. I just thought the administration side of it just wasn't where it is nowadays. Just couldn't quite get traction.
Marketing and governance, but it probably lacking. But if you passion, the
passion was fantastic.
Small pitches. 5 to 10,000 people, and you could feel whether it was Hellas or Alexandros chanting or Croatia or Macedonia or whatever that it reverberated. It really
the passion certainly was there. See, when even in the State League, when the early days when I started, when it was Melbourne, Croatia versus Preston, Macedonia, you got. We used to say it was 10,000. I don't know if it was that many, but you'd have the Croatia, then they go Macedonia. You didn't even know. I remember thinking, what the hell are these guys shouting? But it was the atmosphere and the passion was big time. Yeah, it was really good.
You're there for 5 seasons at South, and like I said, the South's sort of the in that time, 4, 5, 6 national team players, either ex or current at the time, and you go to Footscray JUST for a season, and there too, I think you got relegated. That was the year that you got relegated with Footscray, and I think you had 4 or 5 national team players in that team as well.
Yeah,
it was you and Oscar, and it was. I think Vlado Bojanovski had already left at that time.
No, Vlado was there. Vlado
was there. So so you had
Ernie Tapai. Zarko Luic. He wasn't a national team player, but fantastic player.
Yeah, Zdravko Luic. I think he was quite injured at that last year. Yeah, Tyrone James. We'll talk about
Tyrone. Eddie Campbell from Juventus.
Yeah. What happened that year? It was like who was? I mean, so you'd come off the I suppose they had success in 85, 86 when Shikolatic was coaching. And who was the coach there in 89? It just didn't gel together that year.
Yeah. They brought another guy over. He was a very nice guy, but he wasn't a strong personality.
Okay.
And he couldn't speak English. He struggled, found it very difficult. It was Socceroos that signed me. I was with so I was there a season and a half. Socceroos signed me, probably just more than a season and a half. Socceroos, so I had that year with Socceroos. And Socceroos was the same. He couldn't speak English, but he was a very strong personality, very confident, very strong, and he had us well organised. And then he left and went back home. And this other guy, who was a big name player as well, came out. Just can't quite remember his name. If somebody says it, I'd remember, but I just can't remember his name.
Yeah.
And he struggled. His confidence was, the fact that he couldn't speak English and he couldn't do this and he couldn't do that. He really struggled with it.
So would the players that understood him, would they translate for the instruction or?
Yeah, Vlado Bozanovsky was his translator.
Okay.
Which is a bit of a nightmare. Vlado was a youngster, so kind of trying to break in, and he'd be standing. Especially if the coach wanted to speak to you, he'd bring Vlado in the little dressing room that he had, and he'd be talking, and Vlado would translate. With Seki, it was no problems. As I said, he was a confident man. This other guy struggled with that as well. Yeah, it wasn't good. But what happened there? When a club's got cancer, doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to win anything. Not going to win anything. And that club was on a downward spiral. They were gone at that time. It was a mess. It was untidy. Again, kind of like the Croatians.
Off field,
off the park. Yeah, they were all over the place. It was amateurish. It was terrible. The training facilities, the match preparation, everything was amateurish. I couldn't believe it. After coming away from South and going to that, it was terrible. It was terrible. And you got good players, and even the coaching facility, the way they were doing it, the payments, it was all over the place. It was never going to work. Too many excuses. When you're on the park and you're tired, you don't want excuses. And there was plenty of excuses. The training facility was shit. The training was shit. Everything was poor. The wages weren't there last week. Everything was poor.
Okay.
There's plenty of excuses. So mentally, you lose it. You just, yeah.
Understood. Yeah. Understood. The and from there, you pretty much, do you go straight into coaching after that?
After that year, I joined Thomastown as a player coach. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I went to Thomastown in the last years of the state league. So. You had to. I joined them. I think the first season was 1990, and you had to. So when you say we got relegated from the National League, I think we finished fourth bottom. So they went from being. They started the league with the normal. The bottom two got relegated, and they changed it. They were going to reduce the league, and it was going to be the bottom four, which caused a lot of trouble and stuff like that. And we finished fourth bottom, which was. I spoke to a guy just a. He says, one of the happiest moments of my life is when we beat Just to relegate them out of the National League. The last day of the season, we were actually sitting fifth bottom. So it was kind of near mid-table. And they were doing Laurie Schwab and that was doing all the conundrums. What if this happened, who's going to get it? Nobody picked Footscray Just. And we got beat 3-0 on the last day from Melbourne, Croatia. And somebody else who was below us won 3-0, surprisingly, George Cross or something like that. Somebody won 3-0. So it was a 6-goal deficit, and wow, we ended up finishing fourth bottom.
Full class.
Like yeah, and got relegated out of it. So that was it, finished. I was 34-year-old or something like that, and just got relegated. So I thought to myself, stuff it, I'm going to start coaching whilst I could give value as a player as well, see what I could do. And,
so
Thomastown came to the fore.
What level in the state league was that?
It was a state league. It was a state league 1, and they played an 18-team competition that year, and the top 12 were going to get promoted into because it was going to be it wasn't for legal reasons. They couldn't get rid of State League One. That's why they called it the Premier League. So they said at the start of the year, we're going to have I think they went from one season straight into the next season. They played a 36-game season or something like that. And you had to finish in the top, I can't remember whether it was a top 10 or the top, I think it was a top 10, because they still legally, they had to promote the Division 1 teams. And then the top 10 went into form a 12-team Premier League or something like that. Can't remember the exact details, but you had to finish up pretty high. And that was Thomastown. They were desperate. They hadn't finished that high before, I don't think. So I think they were worried about getting into the Premier League. That was their big aim, sort of thing. So,
and so you in your first year of coaching, obviously you played for Australia, you played for Victoria, you played in NSL. Probably headbutting, if not over 200 games. What is it that you're trying to mould? You're in your mid-30s and you're cultivating. You've had Frank Carrick as a coach. You've had Raleigh Rassage for a short time, but you've had Lenny McKendry. You've had Gardner, who in the early days in Croatia. What is it that you're trying to mould into your first season as a coach?
Looking back, I don't think I knew. Probably the first thing you do is you think you know how to organise a team, how the team should play together, what's required for players to help each other when they're on the ball, and what happens when you lose it, how do you defend and all that. So I thought I knew that, and I'd done some coaching courses and all that sort of thing. So I was I had a fair bit of self-confidence in that I could contribute and make people do things. I was taken aback by the difference. The difference between the National League and going to State League was big. The gap in the players, the gap in the facilities, the gap in the commitment from the players was quite big, quite gaping. So I remember thinking, nah, stuff it, I'm just going to up the ante. I'm going to get more commitment out of them. They want to play here, they're going to have to give us a bit of commitment. I'm not putting up with some of this crap. And Thomastown were regarded as a small club in the first division as well. They'd always been a lower club that got themselves up there, and they had a couple of people putting a bit of money in, but they were still very small thinking at the time. And I remember thinking, nah, stuff it, I'm just going to up the ante. I'm going to get them a bit more committed. So that's what we did. And we actually, I think we done okay. We managed to get into the top 10, whatever it was, which was felt like a great achievement. And then the second year, we actually finished fourth, and we were up there challenging pretty right to the end, which was, I thought, it felt like a good time at the club. It felt quite good. I've still got
Morris Raponi in goals.
And his brother was there as on one of the senior committee. Tony. Tony was a great guy, fantastic guy.
Yeah. You went on to coach for, was it 20 years? Close to around
20 years in a row.
Yeah.
Amazing, when you think of it. Up and down, all over the place.
I
went from Thomastown to Melbourne Knights.
Yeah.
So I'd agreed to go to Melbourne Knights as a coach because they were playing in the summer and we were playing in the winter. So I'd agreed with them, which is big. And I was still a player coach with Thomastown. And just after I agreed to go to Melbourne Knights as their coach for the next season, I broke my leg in one of the games. Wow, that was a nightmare. So I remember them coming and talking, what we're going to do? I said, this is amazing. It's amazing when you look back, you think, how the hell did I manage to do things like this? I was working at the time, full time. I was taking training at night time as a player coach, and I broke my leg. So I'm on plaster, and my leg wouldn't bloody heal. I was in a full plaster for 17 weeks, 4-month nightmare. But the Knights committee men spoke to me. What we're going to do? I said, what do you mean? What we're going to do? You don't want me as a player, do you? You want me as a coach, not as a player. They went, what? I said, well, I don't need. I could coach a team on crutches. Somehow or other, they went with it, sort of thing. So I went here and took all pre-season whilst I'm still on crutches. Bloody amazing when I look back.
So who are some of the players in that team? Because
What, in Melbourne Knights?
yes,
They were a team of superstars.
yes,
Fantastic. We walked away with the league. Unbelievable. We finished 3 games. It was 2 points for a win. We finished 6 points ahead in the home and away series. They were a team of superstars, fantastic players. So it was David Miller in the goal, Andrew Marth at right back, Theo Selamides and George Hanna, and Mark Talach at left back. Then we had Paul Donnelly, we had Alan Davidson, Branko Milosevic, Ivan Silic, Mark Silic, Ivan Kilic, and Francis Avoratifi. Tommy Pondoljak was a youngster coming through at the time. Honestly, they were superstars. They were fantastic. Really good players. Really good players. Joe Biskic, and Biskic was a fantastic player. Super. Really good. They were all good players. So we walked it. We were never in doubt. Got off to a good start and never fell away. We won it quite comfortably. Got through to the grand final. Beat South Melbourne in the semi-finals quite comfortably. Got the final against Adelaide City, who Zoran Matic had that team as superstars at the time, and we should have thrashed them. We missed. I could kill some of the players for missing some of the chances in that game. Finished 0-0, and then they beat us on penalties. Bandits. So, that's life.
It's football, and so you've come full circle in
where I started,
where you started, and you're coaching them again. So that you can see
the big achievement. You know, the big achievement for that, for me to coach Melbourne, Croatia after I played for Just was massive. It was an unbelievable achievement. That's when I thought, wow, these people here like me. Even although they were very nice to me, and I think, and somebody actually said to me, Kenny, I thought you won't last 4 or 6 games. As soon as you lose a game, people are going to bring up the whole Just thing. You're going to be out here. But we never lost a game in the first 4 or 6. We got off to a flyer. We just went for it. It was great. Really good. Yeah. So,
tell us, Kenny, what advice do you have for that sort of 15, 16, 17-year-old boy or girl now? Because you've played at the highest level and you coached a lot of those players coming through. What advice do you have for them?
I've said all my life, probably changing as I get a bit older now. I've said all my life, I don't give people advice. You know how many mistakes I've made in life? I feel stupid giving people advice. Maybe the only advice I get, don't do what I did. Maybe, I'm not sure. But I think, if you want to make it at sport, I look back on mine and wish I was more committed. As I got a bit older, and the commitment I had to the game, if I had that when I was a teenager, I look back and think I would have made it. The commitment I put in when I was 17, 18, 19-year-old was pretty ordinary. And again, it's just what we spoke about, the 17-year-olds, the 18-year-olds. There's so many other things come into your life at that stage. And especially where I grew up in Scotland, listen, it's all different now. But I don't think there's too many people getting married at 19-year-old now. But it was quite common there. And I'd met a girl, the typical things. I was more interested in getting away from training and going, catching up with a girlfriend or my mates and doing things. My effort at making it was pretty ordinary when I was 16, 17, 18. I look back and think, you dickhead. And this, as I said, the state of Scottish football never really encouraged you to do that much anyway. It was kind of on a bit of a downer. So, I don't know. But I think, how do you give people that advice? I think, okay, you talk to them and you go, listen, if you've got some talent, if you work on it, making it at football is a fantastic experience. Making it any sport is a fantastic experience. So if you think you've got a chance of making it, it's really worth giving it a big push, a big shove. At least, and you think of it, if you haven't, and not even that, you see people at 22, 23, there's not a heap of examples, but there's enough examples around there that you know, and then going into coaching, the amount of people I seen who were giving it their best shot, a big shot, but weren't quite good enough, and other people who had so much talent that were doing what I did, they just didn't bother. You look at it and you go, come on, guys. To make, and I seen some players that could have had much better than what they did achieve, you know. And then I've seen other people really achieve as much as they could. So probably that's the only thing I would say. You know, try and encourage them. Think about it. If you got the talent, if you could make it big at sport, it's a fantastic experience. It really is fantastic. So it's worth giving it a big shot, putting up with all the crap and the times where you feel down, and put up with it. Put up with it, because if you could get it, it's fantastic. Fantastic, yeah.
Fantastic words of wisdom. Kenny Murphy, thank you so much for your contribution to Australian football, and all the successes that you've had and the memories that you've shared and the friendships that you've taken from the game. Thank you.
I think you're doing a great job, fantastic job. So it's a privilege for me to have a chat to you as well. So good on you. Thank you very much.
Oh, cheers. Thank you.
Good on you. Thanks very much, Sash.
Hey guys, we've come to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to our wonderful guest. If you like this type of content and would like to see more, how about you hit the like and subscribe button? And have a fantastic day.